Welcome to the Laughter Cabinet, where the jokes are always flowing and the good times never stop.
The backstage air felt thick with something electric, a charged mixture of fear, anticipation, and the faint scent of stale beer that always clung to the underground walls of the Laughter Cabinet. Eddie Malone paced nervously, fingers twitching as he fiddled with the worn notebooks stuffed with jokes, most of them terrible, some deliberately so. The fluorescent bulbs overhead flickered, casting long, jittery shadows that danced like nervous spirits. He could hear the muffled murmur of the crowd beyond the curtain, the curious, the loyal, the lost souls who sought refuge in this subterranean den of laughter and chaos. He took a deep breath, the kind that did little to soothe but everything to steady. Tonight was different. Tonight he wasn't just here to perform. No, Eddie had come to a decision. For years, the word bomb had been a curse, an indictment of failure, a symbol of his downfall. But here, in this peculiar club where reality bent with every joke, bombing was his weapon, his gift, his curse-turned power. He whispered to himself, a mantra laced with bitter irony, fail big or go home. The thought made him smirk despite the trimmer in his hands. The curtain parted with a whispered sigh, revealing Eddie to the expectant crowd. He felt their gaze like a spotlight of scrutiny, the weight of every eye a palpable pressure. He launched into his set, delivering punchlines that were intentionally clumsy, awkward, and spectacularly bad. The silence that followed each joke was thick, heavier than usual, but Eddie welcomed it. He sank into the rhythm of failure, each flop a stroke on the canvas of absurdity. As his jokes fell flat, the club began to ripple and warp subtly. Chairs stretched like melting clocks, their wooden legs elongating and twisting with a surreal grace. The walls shimmered in impossible hues, shifting from bruised purples to neon greens in the blink of an eye. Audience members blinked, their faces contorting between confusion, amusement, and a sort of bewildered reverence. Eddie caught sight of Lola Sparks, her eyes sparkling with mischief and approval from the side stage. She gave him a sly nod, a silent cheer for his embrace of the absurd. The sensation was intoxicating and terrifying. Eddie felt as though he were a conductor of chaos, each failed joke a note in a symphony of disorder. Yet beneath the pandemonium, there was a strange harmony, an underlying balance that seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of the club itself. After the set, the crowd's applause was hesitant but genuine, a mixture of bewilderment and awe. Eddie stumbled off stage, cheeks flushed and heart pounding. In the dim light of the club's back room, Moss appeared, his bowler hat cocked at a rakish angle and a perpetually raised eyebrow that spoke volumes. Balance, Moss intoned cryptically, is not found in control, but in the dance between order and chaos. You've chosen your steps well, Eddie. But beware the music you summon. Eddie blinked, absorbing the riddle. The club seemed to hum around him, alive with possibility and peril. He was no longer just a failed comedian. He was the keeper of a strange and dangerous magic, wielding failure as a weapon. As he looked around at the warped furniture, the shifting colors, and the faces of the performers, who now regarded him with a mix of respect and wary curiosity, Eddie felt a dark seed of hope take root. Maybe failure wasn't the end. Maybe it was the beginning. With a wary but genuine smile, Eddie Malone stepped further into the madness, ready to bomb with purpose and reshape a world that had long forgotten him. But as the laughter echoed and the club's reality twisted anew, one question lingered in the charged air: could he control the chaos without losing himself in the process? The night was far from over, and the Laughter Cabinet was waiting for its next act. The Laughter Cabinet had never felt quite like this before. As I stepped onto the stage, the familiar buzz of the underground crowd greeted me like a half-remembered dream, hazy but charged with electricity. The spotlight, usually a steady orb of light, began to pulse softly, syncing with the erratic beat of my heart. I swallowed hard, feeling the old familiar knot of anxiety tighten in my gut. Yet there was something different in the air tonight, something unspoken, a kind of invitation to madness. I cleared my throat and launched into my first joke, an awkward self-deprecating quip about how my career had become a series of spectacular failures, each one more embarrassing than the last. The words hung in the air for a moment before the club responded, but not as it usually did. The walls seemed to ripple like a funhouse mirror, bending and twisting, the very fabric of the room dancing in time with my floundering punchline. The audience's laughter was a strange, echoing sound, as if layered with multiple timelines folding in on themselves. Behind the scenes, Lola was watching me with that sharp, knowing look she always had. Her brightly dyed hair caught the flickering lights as she leaned toward me, whispering jokes layered with double meanings and inside knowledge of this surreal place. Our whispered banter caused the backstage walls themselves to shimmer and shift, graffiti-like laughter and shadow dancing across the surfaces in sync with our words. It was a secret language, one that made the chaos feel like home. Not everyone was amused. From the darkened corners of the club, Victor Crane observed our unfolding spectacle. His cold, calculating gaze was fixed on me, his perfectly tailored suit bending and straightening unnaturally, as if resisting the club's growing instability. His smirk deepened, part amusement, part warning. Victor's presence was a reminder that beneath the absurdity lay a dangerous game of control and rebellion. Just when the club felt like it might tear itself apart, Moss appeared, as enigmatic as ever. His bowler hat cast a crooked shadow over his face, and his eyes twinkled with mischief and wisdom. With a voice like a riddle wrapped in a joke, he spoke words that sent the audience's laughter echoing backward, bending time itself within the walls of the club. His presence grounded the madness, a cryptic reminder that there were rules even to chaos. The night unfolded as a surreal playground of meta-humor, with performers weaving reality-bending punchlines that commented not just on the show, but on the very nature of existence and performance. Each joke twisted the club's reality further. Chairs floated, lighting flickered into bizarre shapes, and the air buzzed with an electric sense of possibility. We weren't just performing comedy. We were rewriting the code of this strange underworld with every laugh, every groan, every failed punchline. I found myself embracing the bombing, the failure that once haunted me, now a source of unfathomable power. The paradox was deliciously absurd. My most disastrous jokes were the ones that held the key to reshaping worlds. Yet with every warped moment of hilarity, I felt Victor's shadow looming, his desire for order and control clashing violently with our chaotic rebellion. Backstage, Jinx lurked with a sly grin, his mischievous eyes darting between us, his attempts to sabotage somehow adding another layer of unpredictable magic to the chaos. Silas, the quiet sound technician, manipulated the club's technology with subtle, almost invisible gestures, amplifying or dampening the reality shifts with a sorcerer's touch. The boundary between performer and performance blurred utterly. We were no longer simply telling jokes. We were living them, embodying the very absurdity we sought to unleash. Each meta joke was a thread in a tangled tapestry of laughter and chaos, a dance on the razor's edge between creation and destruction. As the night reached its crescendo, the club itself seemed to hold its breath, caught between the exhilarating freedom of absurdity and the looming threat of collapse. And in that suspended moment, I realized the stakes had never been higher. How far could I push this power before the joke ended, before the world outside caught up and demanded a punchline of its own? The laughter cabinet was no longer just a stage. It was a battleground, a crucible where failure became strength, and humor held the fate of reality. And I was at its center, armed with nothing but my bombing and an ironic smile. "All right," I muttered to the empty room as the spotlight pulsed again. "Let's see how deep the rabbit hole goes." Victor Crane's entrance into the main room was less a step and more an incursion. The faint murmur of the crowd dimmed as polished shoes clicked sharply on the scuffed wooden floor, slicing through the atmosphere with surgical precision. His tall frame, clad in a perfectly tailored suit, cast a long shadow against the flickering neon lights of the laughter cabinet. The club, usually a sanctuary of unpredictable laughter and surreal performances, felt suddenly smaller, more constricted, as if the walls themselves were bracing for the storm he carried in his smirk. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victor began, his voice cool and unwavering, "the era of chaotic whimsy must end. Order must be restored. The laughter cabinet, as fascinating as its madness, needs direction, and I am here to provide it." A ripple of uneasy murmurs spread through the crowd. Eddie, standing near the back with his trademark ironic smile tinged by a flicker of apprehension, felt the familiar churn of anxiety in his gut. This was no mere power play. It was a calculated strike aimed at the heart of everything the club represented. Lola Sparks sidled up beside him, her bright hair catching the neon as she leaned in close. "He's playing for keeps," she whispered, eyes sharp. "And he's got the muscle to back it up." Eddie nodded, hands twitching with the need to act but unsure of how. The club's chaotic magic, the very essence that made bombing a source of power, was now under siege. Backstage, the mood was a flurry of urgent energy. Eddie and Lola gathered a small group of allies, Moss with his cryptic riddles, Silas, the quietly magical sound technician, Carla, the steady bartender with an encyclopedic knowledge of the club's lore, and even Jinx, the scrappy rival whose antics were as unpredictable as the club itself. They huddled around a battered chalkboard, covered in scrawled diagrams mixing joke setups with arcane symbols. Lola tapped a finger against the board. "Victor wants control, but he doesn't understand the club. He thinks order will fix everything. But the club thrives on chaos, on the unexpected." Eddie's eyes flickered with a spark of defiance. "Then we'll give him chaos, on our terms." Their plan was as absurd as the club itself, a coordinated series of comedic disruptions designed to destabilize Victor's enforcers and preserve the club's surreal spirit. Jinx volunteered eagerly, already plotting a slapstick sabotage. The night of Victor's first enforced performance arrived. As Victor took the stage with his loyalists in tow, the club held its breath. Suddenly, from the wings, Jinx unleashed a swarm of improvised rubber chickens. The room exploded with unexpected laughter as the squeaky toys bounced across the stage, sending Victor's carefully choreographed routine into disarray. The laughter was not just noise, it was a ripple, a subtle warping of reality that briefly bent the club's fabric. Victor's enforcers faltered, caught off guard by the bizarre surge of joy and absurdity. Meanwhile, Silas worked his magic behind the scenes. Adjusting the soundboard, he wove an undercurrent of mystical frequencies into the ambient noise, stabilizing the club's reality just enough to prevent it from fracturing under the strain of chaos and control. His quiet focus was the invisible thread holding their rebellion together. Amid the swirling chaos, Eddie stepped forward. His bombing power, once a source of self-doubt, now felt like a weapon forged in the fires of failure. He delivered a series of deliberately failed jokes, each one a calculated strike that distorted reality, confusing Victor's grip and empowering the club's defenders. The confrontation was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, Eddie felt the surge of possibility. The fight for the laughter cabinet was no longer just about survival, it was about reclaiming the magic of failure, the dangerous wit that made the club a place where laughter and chaos danced on the edge of reality. As the night wore on, the club buzzed with a renewed energy, electric, unpredictable, and defiantly alive. Victor's gambit had been met with resistance, and the stage was set for a battle where punchlines were weapons and the stakes were nothing less than the soul of the club. And somewhere in the shadows, Moss smiled beneath his bowler hat, his raised eyebrow hinting at riddles yet to be solved. The laughter was coming apart. It started as a faint tremor beneath the floorboards, a subtle vibration that tickled the soles of my shoes and whispered of instability. But within moments, the very walls of the laughter cabinet began to ripple and shimmer like the surface of a disturbed pond. The air thickened with the scent of burnt rubber and stale popcorn, underscored by an eerie symphony of fractured echoes, some laughter, some screams, all jumbled into a discordant melody that threatened to unspool the night. I stood at center stage, the spotlight a harsh, unforgiving eye that burned into my wary face. My hands trembled, not from cold, but from the weight of the moment, the palpable tension hanging between chaos and order, balanced on the edge of my faltering confidence. Behind me, surreal shadows flickered and warped, dancing unpredictably with every failed joke I dared to utter. Each misstep bent reality further, twisting the familiar into the absurd, while the audience blurred into a shifting mosaic of faces, some smiling, some frowning, some morphing into shapes I couldn't name. "Come on, Eddie," I muttered to myself, voice barely a whisper. "You've bombed your way to glory before. You can do it again." Lola Sparks appeared at the edge of the stage, her brightly dyed hair a fiery halo against the flickering neon lights. Her eyes, sharp and rebellious, burned with a fierce determination that contrasted starkly with my own faltering resolve. "You're slipping," she said, voice low but urgent. "The balance is breaking, and if you don't pull it back, this whole place is going to unravel." Before I could reply, a cold presence loomed in the shadows near the backstage corridors. Victor Crane emerged, his tall frame sharply dressed, the calculating smirk never leaving his lips. His gaze was a knife, cold and unyielding, slicing through the layers of chaos like a surgeon's scalpel. "Fascinating," he murmured, voice smooth as silk but laced with menace. "The club's fabric is fraying, yet you cling to your illusions of control." Lola stepped forward, her stance defiant. "You want order, you want control, you'll kill the magic that makes this place alive." Victor's smirk deepened. "Magic is a tool, nothing more, and I intend to wield it properly." Meanwhile, in the dim corner near the bar, Moss watched the unfolding drama with a raised eyebrow beneath his bowler hat. His voice, when it came, was a cryptic riddle that seemed to echo through the shifting air. "Balance is a dance on a blade's edge," he intoned. "Step too far to one side, and the whole stage falls into darkness." I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words settle like lead in my chest. The club's reality was not just a backdrop, it was a living, breathing entity, fragile and volatile. And I was the reluctant maestro, conducting a symphony of chaos with trembling hands. Taking a deep breath, I forced myself to focus, to channel the strange power that my bombing bestowed upon me. Each failed joke was a thread I wove into the fabric of reality. But tonight, my threads were fraying, unraveling faster than I could stitch them back. "Okay," I said aloud, voice steadier than I felt. "Let's try this again." The words stumbled out, awkward and clumsy, but with each one, the shadows shifted, the ripples in the walls pulsed, and the discordant laughter twisted into something almost harmonious. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was a start. Lola's eyes shone with grudging admiration. "You're holding it together, Eddie. For now." But this isn't just about jokes anymore. It's about who controls the punchline. Victor's gaze locked onto mine, sharp and unwavering, and I intend to write the final act. As the club's reality pulsed with unstable energy, I felt my deepest fears rise like a tide within me, the fear of failure, of losing control, of fading into irrelevance. But beneath the dread, a stubborn ember of hope flickered. Maybe, just maybe, failure was not the end, but a beginning. The laughter was coming apart, yes, but so was I. And in that unraveling, perhaps we would find a new pattern, one stitched from absurdity, resilience, and the dangerous power of bombing. The balance was tilting. And the next move was mine. The spotlight dimmed slightly, as if the club itself was holding its breath. Somewhere in the distance, a clock ticked, each second a pulse in the heart of the madness. The stage was set, the players in motion. And the joke, as always, was on me. The backstage hallway of the laughter cabinet stretched long and shadowed, a labyrinth of dim lights and peeling posters from forgotten shows. Eddie Malone shuffled forward, each step heavy with a mixture of dread and determination. Ahead, the antique mirror loomed, its ornate frame scratched and warped, as if it had absorbed the laughter and despair of countless performers before him. But this was no ordinary mirror. It was said to reveal more than mere reflections. It showed truths, memories, and sometimes the ghosts we most feared to face. Eddie stopped before it, the glass rippling like a disturbed pond. His breath caught as the surface shimmered, and then resolved not into his wary, disheveled self, but into a scene that stabbed at his memory with merciless precision. The televised meltdown that had shattered his career years ago. The room around him seemed to fade, replaced by the harsh glare of stage lights and the cold faces of a jeering audience. The younger Eddie stood at the microphone, hands trembling, trying to force jokes that fell flat, his voice cracking under the weight of expectation and personal despair. The laughter was cruel, a sharp cacophony that echoed in the chamber of his mind. Every failed punchline, every awkward pause was magnified and twisted, warping into a surreal nightmare where the audience's faces melted into monstrous grins. A sudden voice cut through the oppressive silence. Moss appeared beside him, as if stepping out from the shadows themselves. His bowler hat was tilted at a rakish angle, and his ever-raised eyebrow gave him an air of bemused wisdom. "Mirrors," Moss said softly, "don't just show what's on the surface. They hold the cracks, the fractures of our souls. Here, you'll see what you need, not what you want." Eddie swallowed hard, his gaze locked on the unfolding scene. Memories flooded in how the laughter had felt like a blade, slicing through his confidence. How the cameras had captured not triumph, but unraveling. He felt the old shame, the bitter taste of failure that had haunted him for years. Yet, as he watched, the distortion shifted. The monstrous grins softened, the faces blurred into shapes not quite human, but not entirely hostile either. The laughter changed tone from mockery to something more complicated, a strange mixture of empathy and chaos. The club's magic was bleeding into the memory, twisting it, reshaping it. "Why show me this?" Eddie whispered, voice trembling. Moss smiled faintly. "Because you must own it. The failure, the pain, it's your power. The more you resist, the more it controls you." Eddie's hand trembled as he reached out, fingers brushing the glass. The surface was cool, then suddenly warm, as if alive. The vision inside shifted again, this time showing his present self, flawed, wary, but standing firm. The mirror no longer rippled with chaos, but reflected back the ironic smile he had come to wear as armor. In that moment, Eddie felt a release, a quiet triumph blossoming in his chest. He was not the broken man from the past, but a man who had learned to wield his failures, to turn them into something unpredictable and powerful. The mirror's surface stilled, and for the first time in a long while, Eddie saw not just his reflection, but his truth. As he stepped back, the hallway's shadows seemed less oppressive, the weight on his shoulders lighter. Moss's cryptic words echoed in his mind, a riddle half solved: to embrace the absurdity, to laugh at the chaos within, and to find strength in the cracks. Outside, somewhere in the club's depths, the faint sound of laughter rippled wild, uncertain, and full of possibility. Eddie knew the battles ahead would test him in ways he could not yet imagine. But for now, in this quiet moment of reflection, he had taken a crucial step toward accepting himself and the strange power that failure granted him. The mirror had shown him his past. Now it was time to face his future. And as Eddie turned away, a new resolve settled in his chest, ready to carry him into the chaos that awaited, armed with the paradoxical weapon of his own imperfection. The backstage room was a cluttered sanctuary, filled with the scent of stale beer, old cigarette smoke, and the faint metallic tang of something unplaceable, the kind of place where reality felt just a little looser than outside. Eddie Malone sat slouched on a battered couch, nursing a lukewarm coffee, his ironic smile fleeting as he contemplated the mounting pressure closing in around the laughter cabinet. He wasn't alone for long. The door burst open with a clatter, and Lola Sparks stormed in, her brightly dyed hair practically glowing under the flickering neon sign hanging above the bar. "We don't have time to sit around feeling sorry for ourselves," Lola declared, pacing with fiery urgency. Victor's pulling every string he has, and if we don't act, this place won't just change, it'll be erased. Her voice was sharp but carried an undercurrent of fierce loyalty that made Eddie sit up a little straighter. We need a plan, a real one, and we need allies. Eddie raised an eyebrow, his mind racing with self-deprecating jokes about how his allies usually ended up abandoning him faster than a punchline bombing on opening night. But Lola's gaze was unwavering, a challenge wrapped in rebellion. Before Eddie could respond, the room shifted as Moss entered. The older man, with his perpetually raised eyebrow and bowler hat slightly askew, leaned heavily on his cane. His voice, when he spoke, was low and gravelly, weaving riddles that hung in the air like smoke rings. Chaos is but a dance of shadows and light, Moss intoned cryptically. To stand firm in the laughter, one must first embrace the silence between the jokes. The group exchanged glances, some amused, some confused. But all understanding that Moss's riddles were not mere nonsense, they were keys to navigating the club's surreal power. Just then, a soft hum of machinery and a faint pulse of light drew their attention to the back corner where Silas worked. The sound technician's lean figure was half hidden behind an array of soundboards and glowing cables. His fingers flew over controls that seemed ordinary at first, but soon revealed subtle pulses of energy weaving through the room. "I've been tweaking the tech," Silas said, eyes sparkling with quiet excitement. "The club's reality isn't just bending on its own. I can nudge it, control the shifts, amplify the effects, maybe even keep Victor's chaos at bay." Eddie nodded, the pieces of their scattered resistance beginning to form a coherent picture. The last to join was Jinx. The young performer entered with hesitant steps, her nervous energy almost tangible. Despite their fraught history rivalry tempered by mutual respect, her sly grin hinted at a readiness to stand with Eddie. "I'm in," she said, voice low but steady. "Victor's rules aren't mine, and if bombing can break reality, maybe it can break his control too." Together, the group gathered around a makeshift table, cluttered with hastily scribbled notes, half-empty beer bottles, and the occasional prop from the stage. Plans were drawn, jokes were written, and strategies formed, each idea wilder than the last, but grounded in the shared understanding that failure wasn't just inevitable. It was their greatest weapon. Eddie felt a flicker of something long buried beneath his insecurities, hope. The chaotic magic of the laughter cabinet wasn't just a curse or a burden. It was a force that could be wielded, shaped by the laughter and loyalty of an unlikely family. As the night deepened and the club's neon lights hummed softly, Eddie looked around at his new allies, rebels, eccentrics, and misfits all, and realized that this was the beginning of something far bigger than any one joke or set. With a wry smile, he muttered to himself, maybe bombing's not so bad after all. And just like that, the balance between chaos and order shifted ever so slightly, setting the stage for the battles yet to come. But beneath the laughter, the shadows of doubt and danger still lurked, reminding Eddie that the fight for the laughter cabinet's soul was far from over. The question wasn't if they could stand together, it was whether they could survive the madness that lay ahead. And as the first hints of dawn crept through the cracked windows, Eddie knew with a mix of dread and exhilaration that the next act was about to begin.